Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news coming out of the Michigan football program late Friday night as Sherrone Moore named the next head coach for Michigan heading into the 2024 year. And if you guys have been rocking with the fellas for the last couple of days, for the last couple of months, you guys know how fired up we are about this. As Michigan fans, it just really made sense for Sherrone Moore to take this head coaching job. And you talk about, who are the individuals that really led Michigan to that national championship? It started with the offensive line. It started with Michigan dominating the line of scrimmage. And Chiron Moore has played a very heavy hand in that. If you're Michigan, you want the culture and the trajectory of this program to continue going where it was. And I think the only way to do that is bringing in Chiron Moore as your next head coach. The boys are fired up. Want to have a conversation two ways. One, talk about Chiron Moore, what he brings to this Michigan program as the full-time head coach. And then Dill, there's an offensive coordinator position open for this Michigan football team. Talk about some candidates that could step in as the next offensive coordinator. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a special shout out, as always, to the Michigan fans. Many of you guys know we are huge Michigan fans. Nothing we love talking more about than Michigan football. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. Obviously, a very special year. We've had an absolute blast talking ball with you guys all year long. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And I think it's going to be a busy next couple of weeks, right? This coaching staff, I don't know if it's going to go through a massive shakeup, but you hear the rumors of Jesse Minter, Jay Harbaugh, maybe going to LA with Jim. So we'll continue to update you guys with the coaching staff changes. Dill, nobody more excited than you about Sherrone Moore being named the next head coach. How we feeling?
No, and you always knew it had to be Sherrone Moore. You have to continue the trajectory of this Michigan program, as you mentioned, and he's the guy to do it, because at the end of the day, this whole turnaround emanated from his room. I mean, that offensive line is what's brought Michigan back. It set the tone for this entire team. It has that edge. It has that attitude. And again, I think everything started with it. He's been the guy. I think he's risen up through the ranks in Michigan. I think he's had opportunities to go elsewhere. I think he wants to be here. I think he knew this was his job at some point, and now it's finally here. And this is almost like, I don't want to say it's perfect situation. I don't think you want to lose Harbaugh necessarily, but if it was going to have to happen, it's nice that it happened this year. Harbaugh gets the title and Chiron Moore gets
almost like it was a blessing in disguise having those suspensions. One, the team rallied together, but more importantly, Chiron Moore gets his feet wet as a game day head coach. I think that made the decision even more obvious that Chiron Moore was going to be the guy. And I think you made a really good point. Two things that I love about Chiron Moore taking this job. One, he's young. I think you might have a head coach for the next 20 years of this Michigan program. And he had opportunities to go other places over the last 3 years, as he was one of the best offensive line coaches and offensive coordinators in the country. And he stuck with Michigan. I think knowing that he was probably going to be the next guy to take this head coach job, you're getting a young, loyal head coach that the players absolutely love, can get it done on the recruiting trail. I don't know how many other boxes there need to be checked for Chiron Moore as this next head coach hire.
Yeah, and obviously the one is going to be experience. He hasn't been a head coach yet. We've seen plenty of first-year guys really work out, Kirby Smart being the obvious one, and Dan Lanning obviously appears that he's going to do it in Oregon. But again, when you're kind of set up like the way Chiron Moore has been in under Jim Harbaugh, being his top lieutenant now for a couple of years, and again, being the guy, when you listen to Harbaugh, it kind of sounds like he knew this was – they were going to lose Chiron Moore if Harbaugh didn't leave. That's at the end of the day. He was well on his way to being a head coach. I think he could have been a head coach earlier. I think, again, I think he's ready. I just can't imagine.
He had opportunities to be a head coach at other places. Like Indiana, Purdue, guys, the programs that were going through hiring processes over the last couple of years. Chiron Moore was a name that got thrown around in plenty job openings, and rightfully so. You made a really good point. I think Jim Harbaugh, and to a certain extent, he kind of knew he was going to the NFL. I think he was grooming Chiron Moore to be the next guy. I think Chiron Moore had to handle a lot of responsibility, almost being that kind of head coach figure for Michigan in 2023. I think it all made sense. I think a lot of Michigan fans feel the same way. The boys are fired up. I think the more interesting conversation now is there's an offensive coordinator position open for this Michigan team. A lot of different ways that Michigan could go here. Would love to hear the Michigan fans and their opinions in the comment section. The boys slightly disagree on this as well. There's a way that you could just elevate. You got a lot of young offensive coaches, I should say, that are very deserving of that job. But I know there's going to be a lot of Michigan fans who say, wouldn't mind injecting another mind into this coaching staff to help revolutionize this offense and get even more out of it. They'll ask you first, if you're Michigan, where are you going with this offensive coordinator hire?
I mean, my gut is telling me maximum continuity. I think you want guys like, and right now it feels like it's obviously just going to be a coach situation with Mike Hart and Kirk Campbell. And again, two coaches who I think Kirk Campbell did a really good job with JJ. I thought this year took some big strides. Looks like he's going to be a first-round pick. Mike Hart's been a really, really good coach, really good recruiter. Obviously, what he's done with that running back room, really good. My personal preference and thought is maximum continuity. Elevate those two. Grant Newsome becomes the O-line coach, and you just kind of keep the train rolling as it was. But again, there might be some home run hires out there that, man, if they would be at all interested in Michigan.
And again, this is suddenly becomes one of the more, it is the most attractive offensive coordinator destination right now. So you have kind of the pick of the litter of sitting offensive coordinators at other programs. And there are also some guys that are kind of free agents, if you will, that would also be very intriguing hires as well. I can see that argument. And when you have such a loaded staff, this is one of the better staffs in the country, right? Mike Hart, Kirk Campbell, who I think is an absolute stud. I think he's going to be a phenomenal offensive coordinator at some point. You have a guy like Grant Newsome, from all the reports, is a young up-and-coming coach. Ron Bellamy, I think you could throw in that race as well. You have a lot of good offensive coaches that are probably deserving of that promotion. That would make a lot of sense. So now another conversation is, all right, if Sherrone Moore is looking at this program and saying, hey, I think we can inject another mind to bring in some more concepts for this Michigan offense, which would make sense. Like, you've seen this offense at times stall out, and you want to see just some more explosiveness, especially in the passing attack. There are some guys that would be relatively interesting, Dill. I think there's a couple ways that you could go, and I'll say one that's kind of wild, and we'll just talk about it briefly. In a perfect world, you look at Chiron Moore and say, all right, he's the next head coach. He's got no head coaching experience. And although he was the interim head coach at times during this season, it's a whole nother animal to operate as the head coach year round on the recruiting trail, meeting with boosters. There's a lot of responsibility. Would you maybe want to bring in an offensive coordinator that's been a head coach of major programs, that has experience, that can kind of be a brain trust for a guy like Chiron Moore? And this might make Michigan fans, and I'm not even sure if I want it, but a guy like Jimbo Fisher, I mean, a solid offensive mind, was the head coach at Florida State, won a national championship, went to Texas A&M. We all know he can recruit. He had some problems with the locker room, that's for sure. I mean, if you want to go that route, and Sherrone Moore wants to bring in a guy that has a lot of experience as a head coach at big-time programs to help Sherrone Moore kind of get into this role, I mean, Jimbo Fisher kind of would be wild. It would be wild, but it would kind of make some sense.
I mean, it'd be fun for sure, because you're looking, I mean, again, people take their shots at Jimbo Fisher. I think I'm not even 100% sure he should have been fired at A&M. Again, like, those were good teams. I know they had some disappointment, but a lot of teams take what they were doing. And you kind of mentioned it, elite recruiter, really good developer of quarterbacks for a good chunk of his career. And obviously at A&M, it felt like as a head coach, sometimes things got on top of him and he wanted to be too involved in everything. And again, like that seemed like it sped out of control on him a bit, but still, yes, you're right. Genius recruiter, genius offensive mind. And you kind of look, there's probably other guys, like you think of a Dana Holgerson, looks like he kind of wants to be back in the fold to an extent, isn't going to get a head coach job now, but if he comes into Michigan, another really good offensive mind, maybe not the best culture builder, but really good offensive mind. And then one other guy who, again, maybe not the culture builder you want, but a great offensive mind, is Bobby Petrino. And he's done a really good job in terms of melding his scheme to the players he's got. And those three guys, I think, make sense. I think, again, my only concern is you don't want to lose some of the guys coming up through the ranks, because they've just been doing a really good job.
Agreed that you want to try to keep this coaching staff intact and elevate those guys. So that would make a lot of sense for those reasons. And what you said with all three of those head coaches, I think the one narrative that you have with all three of them was solid offensive minds as head coaches weren't the best managing a locker room.
But we're great. We're great under really good culture builders, Bobby Bowden and Nick Saban. Obviously,
And what I want to hammer home is that's not a concern that you have with this Michigan team. Like Sherrone Moore, when Sherrone Moore takes his job, the culture. We haven't seen a stronger culture across college football than what Michigan's had the last couple of years. And so bringing a guy like Jimbo Fisher, not to be the head coach, but maybe to help Sherrone Moore in some of those operations might make some sense. There's some other names that, you want to keep. So talking about a guy like Phil Longo has been mentioned. You mentioned a guy.
Liam Cohen is actually the one guy I think if you're going to go outside and go for an up-and-coming coordinator, I think he's the guy. You kind of saw he's run Kentucky's offense in a very similar manner.
Way, yeah.
Like Phil Longo is interesting to an extent, but you're bringing in something that's revelation. You obviously saw the issues that they had at Wisconsin doing that. I think, again, Michigan's really good at what they do. I think Kentucky did a similar thing to what Michigan does. In having him in the fold, I think he would be the one again. And my preference is probably to stick in-house. But if you're going to go out and get one of those up-and-comers, I think Liam Cohen makes a ton of sense. Been in the NFL and done a really good job at a Kentucky team they're not.
Yeah, does similar things. And that's my only pushback against guys like Dana Holgorsen or a guy like Phil Longo, where it's like there's going to be some growing pains. And you look at how Michigan just won a national championship, and the path road for Michigan to win national championships, it is establishing the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football.
But I also do think you want to be able to throw the ball a little bit more effectively and have more of a passing attack that strikes some fear in guys, attracts wide receiver talent maybe a little more. So there are some I don't want to see
Dale, this just popped in my mind, and we'll end it on this. Sorry to interrupt you. What about this? Would be wild. I don't even know if Michigan fans would want that. Brian Hartline at Ohio State. One, you're poaching like an elite recruiter for Ohio State. He just got demoted from offensive coordinator. You talk about getting wide receiver talent to Ann Arbor. You talk about hurting Ohio State. That would be an interesting conversation to have again. I would love to hear from you guys. I don't even know where my best choice, I think, is still staying with this program, but a lot of
I don't know if we can have Brian Hartline in that ridiculous speech he gave in 2022, and then they just got their there's something about him.
I don't even know if I'd want to see Brian Hartline on wearing the amazing blue coifer, and I don't even know if he'd do it either. So
recruit wide receiver as well, but that might be about.
Yeah, we'll see. A lot of conversations that are going to be needed to have over the next couple of weeks. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Late Friday night news, massive for Michigan. The boys are fired up. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.